Dear friends, good evening. I welcome you all for the sixth day of our 7 days international webinar on women empowerment through sensitization. The research person for today's webinar is Ms. Shamini Nambiar, the Director, International Commercial and Cultural Development Forum, Children Welfare, Singapore. She has 20 years experience in managing and working with learning difficulties and special needs. She is trained in APE Therapy Australia. She is a member of the Austrian Behavioral Intervention Association Australia during 2014 to 2016. She is a member of the Coalition Against Bullying of Children and Youth during 2003 to 2007. And Ms. Shamini Nambiar is with us to share her experience regarding women empowerment. Welcome you, ma'am. I
Hi, good
extend a
evening.
hearty welcome to you on my own behalf and also on behalf of the Center for Women Empowerment and Women Studies of Manonmaniam Sundaranar University. Welcome you, ma'am. The section is yours now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Revati. Good evening, everyone. Today, I'm going to speak about something that we women actually, in the lines that we may go through in my area of expertise, which is students with children and students with special needs. One area that I'm going to be talking about is basically autism. Just to give a bit of a feedback of what autism is about, and for some who may know or may not know, basically, Dr. Revati, are the slides visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
I
you.
have added to the screen, ma'am. It is visible.
All right. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
So autism is actually a neurodevelopmental disorder. It is a lifelong disorder that affects a person's ability to make sense of the world and relate to others. Autism actually comes from the word autos, a Greek word for self, and a person with autism is often referred to someone who lives in his own world. If you do realize that a person with autism is very preoccupied, or a child with autism is always very preoccupied in his little world, and they always engage in their own play. Now, what actually causes autism? There are no theories to say that for definitely for what actually causes autism. But of course, since we say that it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, it affects the brain development. And it may occur before birth, could be during birth, or it can be after birth. While there is a combination of causes of autism, it is not fully understood, suggesting that there is a biological correlation affecting the parts of the brain that process language and information coming in from the senses. There are some researchers that actually suggest that there may be an imbalance in certain chemicals in the brain, but of course, we do not have definite answers for that. Next slide, please. Now, how are people of different degrees of autism understood? Basically, autism is a spectrum. So being a spectrum, there is no one person, there are no two people actually who are the same. And it depends on the severity of their autism and the intellectual ability. Now, the autism diagnosis is verified using the DSM-5, where this diagnosis is the one that actually determines whether the child has autism or not, right? And autism may have differing degrees in as well as intellectual disabilities. Now, there may be a combination, and so we can't make assumptions and to imply how low or how high unless an assessment is done. Now, every person with autism is understood differently. Is there a cure for autism? Some parents, mothers question this. Now, is there a cure? Can my child outgrow this? There is no cure per se. Autism is not a disease. It is not an illness. It is not a sickness where the child can take medication and be okay by it. And it is also not something that you would outgrow over time. And so autism is actually a lifelong developmental disorder. When we say lifelong, mothers can get very worried. And they can ask you the question as to what you mean lifelong. That means I'm going to be stuck trying to understand my child till when? How is my child ever going to be so called normal? Yeah. But actually, the child, it is something that we overcome. It is not that something that we outgrow. We overcome it as mothers. We overcome it with our children through intervention, through training, through skills that we want them to acquire, but not a cure condition. Right? There is a wide body of research to support the knowledge that young children with autism experience significant improvements when we actually have intervention for them. Intervention, there are many kinds. I will go to that later. Now, a child or a preschooler with autism is different from her peers. Children with autism often require explicit instruction and practice of the core missing skills in autism in areas of social interaction, communication, self-regulation, organizational skills. Now, social interaction is something that affects many, many autism children because they are unable to make the other person understand, or the other person, the mainstream person, is not able to understand their gestures, their signs, why they do not communicate the way that a normal person does, a mainstream person does. So this is some challenge that many, many children with autism go through. Social interaction mainly, and communication comes next. Now they tend to have speak in a very repetitive manner sometimes, and you may be thinking, or some people maybe get very offended as to why they do that. But actually they are trying to process. It's a processing skill. Probably they would have watched a movie yesterday, and they are only able to process the movie today. So they would be probably repeating the words of their favorite movie, their favorite song, or something that they can relate to that they had actually done a day or two before, because they are only processing it at that point when they are actually saying it. Self-regulation are things like gestures, like where they tend to rock themselves, or if they flap their fingers, and things like that, is they are actually trying to self-regulate themselves. And organizational skills does not come very easy to these children with autism, because they are unable to put together what comes first and what comes next. So we, mothers or educators, have to put forth for them how to see and regulate and organize their day-to-day schedule. That's why tasking is actually very important. Next slide, please. Now, autism is diagnosed, as I told earlier, when a series of assessments are done called the DSM-5. Now, it is persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction based on many contexts. Now, you would see in an assessment, the child would have deficits in social emotional reciprocity, ranging, for example, they are not able to have back and forth normal conversation. If you were to ask a child with autism, say, what is your name? The child will probably ask you again, what is your name? And if you ask the child, how old are you? The response you will get is, how old are you? They do not have that back and forth conversation ability. So in turn, reducing the interest of the other person. Another child, when two children are playing, the other child is unable to understand, why are you repeating after me? I'm asking you the questions. You're supposed to answer me, not repeat after me. So these are the challenges that they go through that affect their day-to-day social interactions. Now, non-verbal communication is very, very important in children with special needs or autism. For instance, a mainstream child would be able to sense that, my mother is angry with me, my mother is upset, my mother is busy, my mother is cooking, But a special needs child or a child with autism may not be able to pick on these non-verbal communication cues because they are unable to understand that the adult or the teacher is going through an emotional maybe emotion of anger, or emotion of upset, or emotion of happiness. They are unable to assess that. So in we do see instances where, in let's say in a funeral, where everyone is very solemn and sad, you would see the child with autism or the special needs child laughing. And this actually gives a very mixed signal in a situation where everyone is attending a funeral, because the child is not able to understand what's going on. And the people there are going to mistake, thinking that, oh, this it's a joke for the child, but actually it's the child's lack of understanding of non-verbal communication. Now, another thing is they are unable to maintain relationships, right? In a playground, they are unable to go forth to their friends to actually tell them that, hey, can I join you? Can I play with you? Can I share the toy with you? They are unable to do that. So in instances like that, building the relationship and maintaining relationships are the hardest for children with autism. So the severity is actually depending highly on the social communication impairment and the restricted repetitive behaviors. When we say restricted and repetitive behaviors, are behaviors that they constantly do. For instance, that particular child could be flapping their hands all the time for regulation, as I mentioned earlier, or they could be just swaying themselves back and forth, back and forth. So these are the behaviors that you would see are very repetitive in a child with autism. Now, motor movements. Yeah. So, as what I said earlier, lining up of toys. These are very, very basic signs and signals that some parents may have observed in a child as early as 2 years old. They would probably take a pen and then they would write all over the wall in a straight line, or they line up their toys in a straight line, flapping. And echolalia, as I had mentioned before, is the repeating after the adult or the friend who's speaking, basically repeating or processing. These are the two things. And insistence on sameness is something that is very distinct in many children with autism. Is they insist that they must take this route. If they do not take this route, they get upset. And every day at 12 p.m., they must have their lunch. If they do not have their lunch at 12 p.m., they get upset. Every Tuesday, for instance, they need to wear a blue shirt. And if it's Tuesday and they do not get their blue shirt and it's in the laundry, they get upset. So these are the things, these are the signs and signals that they actually face as parents. These are signs and signals that you can pick up on. And it's actually it's not that it's a disability to them. It's basically they are very routine people. And trying to get them to task and do routines is something that will actually help them along the way. And circumscribed interests, for instance. So a particular circumscribed instance I can name is if that child with autism has got heavy interest on cars. So every make, every model, every year, which year the make has was released, who was the researcher behind the make of that car, everything they would know in their fingertips. So this is not something that anyone and everyone can do. So this can be actually a strength. If you ask me, this can be quite a strength in the students. And of course, another very, very distinct characteristics of children with autism is the sensory aspect, where they are unable to regulate themselves. They tend to move a lot. They tend to jump around and unable to actually understand why their body is reacting in this way. So in cases like this, families and mothers, what they can do is they can actually guide them through regulation, give them exercise, give them sensory diet activities to actually keep them regulated. Now, very simply, children with autism uh, need structure. And there must be clear system of rewards for desired behaviors and consequences for inappropriate ones. We do know that there are children with autism who display inappropriate behaviors, where we must tell and teach them through tasking, through visual aids, through picture exchange, that these inappropriate behaviors are wrong. At the same time, if they have displayed behaviors that are commendable, they need to be rewarded as well. Very, very important is consistency. Children with autism, they need regularity and consistency. Why? Is because it actually keeps them very calm and regulated. When there is a shift in their daily routine or regulation, they may tend to have meltdowns, they may tend to act up, they may get aggressive. As they get older, their behavior and challenges actually get slightly difficult, more difficult each year. So the only way to actually curb this and to calm them down is to be consistent. And very importantly is to be clear. Between mom and dad, there should be a clear understanding, clear instructions to everyone, so that everyone is on the same page and they are not confused. With confusion, with uh, mainly with confusion, they tend to have meltdowns. Some possible interventions and strategies to let your child know what is going to happen next. This is what they look forward to all the time, setting expectations. Basically, even us as adults, when we go to work in the office or a mainstream child, we set the expectations from the start. So the end of the road is very clear. So it's actually the same thing for a child with autism. Set the expectations, be consistent, and follow through. It is not easy in the beginning, but once it's set, it's very smooth and it keeps everyone happy. When there are less meltdowns and when there is less aggression, it is also easier on the parents, on both mother and father. And also timers are very important. Why? Because so the child will be able to know, okay, how much time I have to finish my task, how much time do I have to play, how much time do I have time to spend outdoors. So everything is set very clearly and precise, so that we curb meltdowns. A very important thing that I feel some families fail to understand is acknowledging when the child is complying. Basically, it is not easy for the child with autism to be able to process that much information, and because they take more time than a mainstream child. So, in instances like where they actually succeed the little milestones, very importantly is to actually acknowledge it and celebrate it, so they know that, oh, okay, so this is what makes everyone happy. And that's also in turn teaching them emotions. Now, letting your child know and earning privileges as they grow older is also something that should be incorporated in the learning process, because the child will be very clear as to what our expectations are. Something that not many families follow is giving choices. Choices are very important because it makes the child feel important. For instance, if it's breakfast and you ask the child the day before, okay, would you like to have pancakes? Would you like to have bread? Or would you like to have cereal? So you have given the child three choices. And in that three choices, you have asked the child to choose. Okay, what would you like to have breakfast the next day? And the child chooses cereal. And it makes the child feel happy that I've made an important choice about my breakfast. It's to us and to some mainstream children, it's nothing. It's breakfast. How difficult it is to just decide whether I'm going to have pancakes or am I going to have a cereal. But for a child with autism, to make that choice is actually very important. And one thing we have to always remember, and if the child has decided, I am going to have cereal on Monday, and you run out of cereal and you decide, hey, what's the big deal? I'm not going to serve cereal today to him, instead, him or her, and instead I'm going to serve pancakes, then you might need to be prepared for meltdowns, because the child may or may not accept, because in their mind they have already fixed that no. And if it's a child that has got that characteristic of circumscribed interest, or a particular behavior, then they will not want to change. They do not like differences, and change in schedule and change in routine. So if they don't like it, and then instead of cereal they get pancakes, then sorry you might tend to see a meltdown, and the meltdown may last anything from 5 minutes to a couple of hours. So to avoid things like this, sometimes we give them the choices and we try to follow through. And if your child is as they grow older, sometimes we do let parents know, families know, that maybe you can give them more than one choice, because there are instances where you really cannot get what they want, but you want to teach them that, hey, come on, let's just try to be a little bit more flexible. Then, as they get older, you can try to incorporate a little bit of changes in their routine, and pull back a little, so that you can try to assess the situation as they get older. These are some of the things that you can try to look into. Basically, for children with autism, they tend to have language difficulties, and in communication might be a bit of a problem for them. So in instances like this, schedule boards actually help, because we put up the board for them, and then we tell them, okay, now you tell me now, what is it that you want to do. So there are schedule boards that say, okay, I want to play now, or I'm hungry, or I'm upset, and I don't want to go out. So for them to be able to express themselves is very important. I do see that when educators or parents are not able to use schedule boards correctly, or do not use schedule boards, or PECS, it's a picture exchange communication program, if it's not used correctly, the children actually get very upset, because they are trying to tell you something, but you're unable to understand them. And that's when they get really upset, and they might have a meltdown, they might start crying, or they might start being aggressive. But it's actually very simple. If you had tried to do a bit of an assessment or backtrack, you would realize that they were unable to actually understand what you're trying to say. So getting them to actually communicate via schedules, via PECs, is actually a very, very important tool for children with autism who have communication barrier. And these days, of course, when we first started out, and when autism was first, when it came to light, we all used manual cards and charts. These days, there are many apps that actually incorporate PECs, and families can actually use such tools. Now, what happens when we have a meltdown? Okay, we've been speaking about that. Okay, why it happens? It happens because they're unable to communicate. It happens because there's a change in routine. It happens because sometimes they are tired. It happens sometimes because there's lack of sleep. So there are many situations why our children actually display such behavior. So what happens when they display such behavior? Most importantly, is not to say no, or not to say stop. It's basically just redirecting the behavior and not reinforcing that behavior. If the child really is insisting that they do not want to go to the playground, dragging him and telling him, no, come, let's go, let's try, it's not going to work. It's going to make it even worse. Instead, you can go back, take baby steps, and maybe share a social story about going to the playground, introducing the playground and the things in the playground to them visually at home first. Then show them something live. Take pictures of the playground that you want to visit, and give them 3 or 4 days or maybe even a week. For some of them, they need more time. Introduce them to the playground or the place that you want to take them to. Maybe they may not like the airport so much because of the flying planes. They may not like the zoo so much because of the animals. So if you want to take them to places where you feel that they might resist, instead of telling them, no, let's go, let's try, it's not that bad, it's not that bad, it's going to cause you a lot of trouble in trying to manage the behavior socially and within yourself in the family, as well as cause severe stress to the child. So instead, we can try to introduce the situation to them, what you're going to visit, a new activity, a new place, a new friend, a new teacher, even. Take pictures, let them know, tomorrow there will be a teacher coming by to visit you, or tomorrow we are going to start a new swimming lesson. This is your teacher. This is the way we are going to go. This is how we're going to be. This is the time we're going to stop. This is the time we're going to start. Everything clearly laid out to them so that they'll be able to understand what to expect, so it doesn't come as too much of a shock for them. As we know, they may have or they may face processing issues. So it's hard for them to process everything at one time. When you throw the pool, just throw the pool to them with many people and a new face and everyone talking, it's just too much. It's really a sensory overload for some of them. Yeah, so when we speak about a sensory overload, and if the child is overly stimulated, this is what we try to actually take them away from the situation and redirect them away from the situation rather than putting them through the same thing again, which is going to make them even more stressed and cause stress to yourself. The best way to do is just giving them tasks, assignments, making them understand, letting them know what to expect, what to do next. The first then approach is always very, very helpful to students with children with ASD, because they will know, okay, first I do this, then I do that. Okay, then this is what the action and consequence is going to be about. This is what I'm going to see tomorrow. This is what I'm going to eat. There are some instances where some families actually say and share, I've heard that, oh, I can't just plan everything out. I can't just do everything. But these are the small little pains that we take in the start upon knowing the diagnosis. These are the little interventions, home interventions that we can do within our home so that we can give the support. As they grow older, they tend to get a little bit more understanding. They tend to be a little bit more uh, matured to try to understand the situation better. But there are some extremes where they are unable to. As they get older, it actually gets tougher. So we try to look at other areas where we can try to bring in the intervention support, or we can try to think of ways that, we may have failed many times, but, we try to think of ways that we can complement what their activity, make it not so strenuous for them mentally and things like that. Yeah. So basically, that's all. Yeah. So these are some of the this is to sum it. Basically, we spoke about what is ASD, what is autism, and how, or what is it and how is it diagnosed, and the type of behaviors that we actually see in a child with autism, how we can actually support and curb these behaviors in trying to support them so that it's easier on the parent, easier on the child. And as a society, it's also important that we understand that the child is actually going through a roller coaster of sensors where they are unable to actually regulate sometimes, and it's definitely not easy on the adult that's caring for them, the caregiver. So when we step out and we see someone who has got autism and a caregiver who's actually having a hard time, we let's all be more understanding. Thank you.
Ma'am, there is a question from a participant to relate autism to women empowerment. To relate it to women empowerment, ma'am.
Now, okay.
How to empower the children of autism?
Yeah, I started out by saying that autism is actually something that many families mothers, it's always quite a lot to take on mothers, because they take it upon themselves that, oh, it's me now, it's because I have to quit my job, I have to be the one to do the scheduling, and I have to have the sleepless nights. So women, I feel self-care is very important. If you have a child with autism, it's always a two-way thing. It is definitely, you can't do it on your own. You will have to get support from educators, from your spouse, and it's also very important to accept. I do see in my line of work families that go through denial. Now, basically, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy in trying to accept this news that you receive, that your child has got learning difficulty or special need. It's definitely not easy, but you should empower it. Be happy that you have an intervention solution for your child, and think about how you can actually gather your source of support. It may be your spouse, it may be the educators, it may be the interventionists, it may be the school, it may be your family, it may be your in-laws. All the support that you need is actually very important. And self-care.
Ma'am, there is a question from Harilal Priyanka. What is the major challenge the parents face in socializing the child?
Okay, all parents actually go through this at one point in time, where they are unable to bring their child out in public, because they feel that, oh, no one's going to understand. Everyone's going to think that my child is mad. Everyone's going to think that, my child is going to cause chaos. My child is never going to be able to get invitations from um, uh, birthday parties. We hear of things like this. Now, it's always important to have a support group. Yeah, and I suggest that socially, it is very, very important for a child with autism to have a good social circle. It's not easy, but a support group with other mothers who actually have children with special needs. It's always good to have form your own support group, and then on top of meeting these mothers on the side on your own, if you find time to meet mothers on the side on your own, or if you can have the support groups together, where you meet up and then have little play dates with children, very basic, a visit to the playground, just a coloring activity. Not necessarily the children with autism will play together, not necessarily the children with autism are going to color together. They may be engaging in parallel play separately, but being in the same room, and knowing that, there's someone actually doing the same activity as me, coloring like me, and doing something like me, is actually going to give the mothers some, at the same time, give the child to know that there is someone else who's actually doing the same activity as me.
How to empower them, ma'am? How to empower the autism children? Is there any ways or means to empower them?
Now, in trying to, okay, basically, for women and children to empower, as with most challenges in life, it can't be entirely surmounted without the help of others, as I mentioned earlier, right? So it's always very important that one we try to work together as professionals and as families, to try to actually give the support, and give them that families are moving towards a good model, some resources, and try to get that support in trying to empower the women who have children with autism.
Yes, ma'am, there is a question from Professor Priyanka. Do they prefer any specific color?
There is a myth. That myth, I will still say it's a myth, that some children may not like children with autism may not like the color yellow, or they may not like the color black, but it's not proven. There is it could be specific to that child. It need not be specific to autism. It's never specific to autism. It's mainly specific to the child. So it could be that the child, one child with autism may like yellow, and another child with autism may not like yellow at all. At the same time, textures like tactile related. One child with autism may not like banana, and another child with autism could really like banana. So it's not necessarily specific to autism. It's not proven.
What about the future of these children, ma'am? What about the
In those
future of them?
Yeah. In those days, we used to think that children with autism actually have no future. I totally disagree with that. I work with many children with autism who actually can do very, very good basic data entry work. They know how to, because they are very routine, they know how to leave home, they know how to actually go to work, take the same bus, take the same train to a particular place, because they know that's the place of work. They can start work there, and then they do everything very routine. It's like a data entry job. It could. I have a child, an 18-year-old boy with autism who actually, I know a boy who actually is very good with designing. So he's actually working with a web designing company where he does very good online designs for them. So these are the little milestones that women, mothers with children with autism can empower and build confidence in their children. Basically, to make them more strong and confident in claiming their life and making them strong and confident in, so that they can face society. Because when the children are empowered, the mothers are immediately empowered.
Is there any scope for any formal education for them, ma'am?
Okay, autism spectrum disorder is a spectrum, as the name says it. So, being a spectrum, there is high functioning and low functioning. So, there are some, I shouldn't say really low functioning, but on the lower level of the spectrum, where they may not be able to do the things that are regularly done across by mainstream children or children on the higher end of the spectrum. So there is intervention. There are many strengths. Some of them are very good in language, some of them could be very good in math. Mostly many of them are very good in arithmetic and math. So that gives them an opportunity to actually do functions that are related to um, jobs that require accounting. So they in a job, let's say maybe in a factory, they are able to do jobs like counting and sorting and doing things that are related to math. So they may not have any formal education per se, but definitely a specialized curriculum that can help them integrate into society. If we are looking for them to be degree holders, of course there are those people who have autism and who have graduated masters and gone on to get their PhD, but they would have had their struggles as they had gone along, but they would have been probably assessed to be on the higher end of the spectrum. But those on the lower end of the spectrum does not mean that they do not get any formal education, but they do get specialized support in their curriculum.
But we don't have any special school for them.
They do. There are many special schools around the world that actually cater to special needs and specifically to autism. Autism is something that many researchers are also very intrigued by, because there are many things that the child with autism is actually very capable of doing. They may not be able to do the math, the English, the science, the physics aspect of the academics, but they will be able to probably do something more more defining, maybe in an area of art, maybe in an area where they are very particular about checking quality analysis. These are the distinct characteristics that you will see in a person with autism.
There is a question from Professor Parvati. Is there any vaccine available for autism?
No, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is not a disease. It is not something that you can get a cure for. So there is no vaccine, there is no medication. Basically, lots of intervention and lots of support from family and surrounding, and lots of love.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for your information about autism children and the guidelines you have given for the parents of autism children. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for accepting our invitation and thank you for your information regarding the autism children. Thank you, my dear participants, for your support for the programs organized by the Center for Women Empowerment and Women's Studies. Participants, even if you have not submitted the feedback form of any 1 day or 2 days, don't worry and kindly fill the feedback forms of tomorrow, which will be posted in the chat box tomorrow. After taking a summary of all your attendance for the 7 days, and it's not compulsory that attendance of 7 days is a must for getting a certificate. We will prepare a consolidated statement, and if you have the minimum attendance of these 7 days, you'll be issued the certificates. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, my dear
Thank you so much for
participants.
giving me this opportunity. Thank you. Good
Thank you, ma'am.
evening.